Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michelle Ray, the Executive Director of the Walter Cates Foundation. I'm pleased to welcome you to our new virtual mini-series, Courageous Conversations. Each event in this series will feature thought-provoking and action-inspiring talks that are essential for anyone who's focused on, interested in, or driving diversity and inclusion inside or outside of their organization. We will feature nationally recognized DEI experts, as well as leaders in our own industry, all of whom will provide keen insights and takeaways for timely and important topics of the day. But before I go any further, I would like to acknowledge the generous support and steadfast commitment of our sponsors who make events like this, as well as our work, possible. I would like to recognize our official sponsors at Charter Communications and Comcast NBC Universal, our benefactors at A&E, Cox Communications, Univision, and ESPN. And in addition, we're grateful for the many other sponsorships provided through Discovery, CommScope, Warner Media, and many more. We want to thank each and every sponsor again who helped to further our work and to make DEI a priority. So really now, onto the brass tacks. In this, our very first episode, we want to contemplate what it means to be young, gifted, and Black. Advocates consistently beat the drum to find ways to engage more female and minority students in STEM fields, which, as we know, are largely dominated by men. But within that group is perhaps one of the most underrepresented demographics, Black and African-American men. In fact, data from the National Science Foundation asserts that among Black men who earned science and engineering doctorates in the US between the years of 2003 and 2013, only 4.5 and 4.8% respectively were able to get doctorate degrees in science and engineering. So it's very clear to us that much of the work still needs to be done to increase the number of Black men in particular and people of color more generally in the STEM field. And it's really for this reason today that we have one of the leading voices and advocates for diversity and inclusion in STEM. I want to introduce our keynote and moderator, Dr. David Porter. Dr. Porter is currently the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at the Haas School of Business at the University of California in Berkeley. Dr. Porter holds 5 degrees, but what is worth noting is that 2 of those degrees that he holds are in STEM disciplines. He holds both a bachelor and a master's degree in industrial engineering from Stanford University. And by the way, David was also a former executive director of the Walter Cates Foundation, so he's acutely familiar with our work as well as our focus. But before I let you see David, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. My apologies. I want to encourage you today, as part of the conversation, to submit your questions through our discussion in the Q&A tab, which should be located in your Zoom window. We'll do our very best to answer your questions. And also be ready when our moderator comes to you with any questions during our audience opinion polls. Remember, your participation will be key. So without further ado, I want to bring on Dr. Porter to set the stage and to kick off today's conversation. So welcome, David, and take it away.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you for that generous introduction. Thank you for welcoming me back to be a part of the Walter Cates Foundation magic. I really appreciate it. And especially thank you for including me in a panel, Young, Gifted, and Black, Inclusivity and STEM. I am really going to lean into the young part, although I think the brothers on the panel next to me can lay much more claim to that than I can. So in any case, I mean, I think you set the table really nicely. I mean, I think the reality is that the need to close the gap as far as women and people of color within STEM is something that we've known for quite some time. Actually, the National Academy of Engineering did a report in 2000 saying that if the country did not get more women and more particularly Black and Latinx kids interested in math at that point, so that by the time they were in their 20s, they would be able to be engineers in computer science, we would have this huge shortage of engineers and technologists. Now, this is what they predicted 20 years ago. And the reality is we didn't do what we needed to do as a country, and we have that huge gap that we're now madly trying to address. And so today, I think it will be a great opportunity for us to have a chance to talk just a little bit about what are some of the things that may be impactful that one, individuals who are interested in STEM can kind of do to kind of build their skills in this area, and two, what kind of the corporate partners of Cates can do to kind of lean in to this effort. Because I really think it's going to take a combined effort among everyone involved. And so, without further ado, I'd like to go on and introduce the panelists, because they're the ones who really bring in the magic. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Rahsaan Harris, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Citizens NYC, a nonprofit created during New York City's fiscal crisis in the 1970s to help New Yorkers come together to improve the quality of life in their neighborhoods. National grant-making organizations. He's certainly known within the cable and entertainment industry for all the work that he did with the Emma Bowen Foundation, where he did a phenomenal job in that role before he came to his current role. And Rossan has a BA from Princeton. He has a master's in management from NYU, a master's in high school science education from Columbia, and earned his Ph.D. in public and urban policy from the New School. So you like just kind of staying right there in that one little local area and just kind of hitting all the major schools? Is that how it works?
Hyper-local is what works these days.
I'm gonna have to keep that in mind for my next slide. The next panelist I'd like to introduce is Nicholas Johnson. Nicholas graduated in May 2020 with a Bachelor of Engineering Science with a degree with a concentration in operations research and financial engineering, and minors in computer science, statistics, and machine learning, and applied computational mathematics. It's going to take all of my degrees just to be able to read about all of his degrees. This is really, truly amazing. But probably what's even more amazing than that is he was the valedictorian for Princeton's class of 2020 and is the first Black valedictorian in Princeton's history. So that's truly phenomenal. He's a recipient of the James Hayes Edgar Palmer Prize in Engineering, which is awarded to the member of the senior class who demonstrated excellent scholarship capacity for leadership and promise of creative achievement in engineering. He's currently a Ph.D. candidate in operations research at MIT, where his core research focus on developing a more unified theory of optimization and machine learning with a particular interest in applied problems in the healthcare space. He's done internships at Google at their headquarters, and he also previously worked at the Montreal Institute for Learning Algorithms in Canada, where he's a native. And so in any case, this is really more about you all than about me, but since you all have this Princeton thing in common, I figure I just kind of start there. So what was it like to be, young, talented Black man in an Ivy League institution? I mean, I know a little bit about Ivy League institutions, and what I do know is that none of the Ivy League institutions were really built for us. So tell us a little bit about what your experiences were like, and maybe something we might want to take away from understanding that. And Nicholas, I think I'll start off with you since you had the most recent experience there.
Absolutely. Well, first off, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation here today with both of you. Going into Princeton, I think I had a very unique perspective by virtue of being Canadian and also having very strong roots in Jamaica and in the Bahamas. And I think that I got to Princeton, and it was really my first time navigating an institution like Princeton, an institution that had such strong ties to slavery and that was fundamentally built without inclusivity ideals in mind. And I will say that over the past several decades, Princeton has done a lot of good and necessary work to address this problem. I think of mandatory inclusion and diversity training to incoming students. I think of the Carl A. Fields Diversity Center on campus. That being said, a lot more work still needs to be done, because the fact of the matter is that when institutions aren't built with ideals of inclusivity in mind from day one, it is extremely hard to later mold the resulting culture into one that is consistent with an inclusive environment. And during my time at the university, I couldn't help but realize that not all members of the Princeton community bought into these values of inclusion that the university was supposedly promoting. I think to many microaggressions during my time there, whether that be students expressing racist views or professors using racially offensive language for supposedly educational purposes. I think that one thing that really helped me navigate that environment was being able to identify a group of students, a group of friends, community members at Princeton that shared an identity with me, and that I was able to share these experiences with and think about how I could help contribute to playing my part in helping to create a more inclusive environment. I think that as a person of color, it's very important to be aware of this, have a willingness to engage in this type of dialogue in the community, have a willingness to help educate some of the other members of the community, but also realize that it's not our responsibility to help educate individuals that might hold some of these views. But I'm very curious to hear what your thoughts are, Rossan, having had an experience at the university several years before I did.
Absolutely. It's first and foremost, I want to thank Michelle and the Cates Foundation. This is such an amazing opportunity to have an authentic conversation in a moment where it matters so much. And it is really humbling to be here with Dr. Porter, because your support really sponsored my success at the Emma Bowen Foundation. I was really glad what we were able to accomplish through our work together. And Nicholas, you in particular, you are basically the ancestors' wildest dreams. To think about the University of Princeton having a Black valedictorian, given the history and the founding story, not including us as human beings during that moment is incredible. And so, as I think about this whole topic in the first place, young, gifted, and Black in the whole world, there are 1 billion boys and girls who are young, gifted, and Black, and that's a fact. So that part of the song makes me think that, while we are 3 accomplished Black men, we aren't the only ones that are young, gifted, and Black, and there's so many opportunities to engage us. You talked about the Carl Field Center, coming into Princeton, that was, and we named ourselves, but it was the Third World Center. And it was almost like a revolutionary act that we are here. We are the countries that you might not have thought are the most valuable, but now we have a place on campus that we're going to congregate, get strength, and work with one another. During the 90s, I think that we benefited from the struggles that the pioneers went through. They kind of softened the blow, and it was it was a time when we were integrating a lot of the institutions that were almost all white. And so even though it wasn't made for us, there was space that were created that if we took a chance that we can get into. Some people were really alienated, but others got a chance to find their piece of Princeton. And I think holding on to the legacy that could be yours by being part of the institution and trying to make the most of it is so important. And it's shown itself because at Princeton, during our reunions, it's a big gathering, everyone coming together. The oldest class come down the parade first, and they come down the hill to the graduation spot. And then the younger classes come after it. And you can literally see the history happening and unfolding in front of your eyes as you see, women coming down the parade when they weren't before. And then people of color coming down. And we get to the bottom of the hill and you see your class, Nicholas, graduating. It gives us so much pride because it lets you know that, although progress may be slow, that you can get there. And I'm glad the university saw that including more people in their family made a difference and made the university better. And I hope that other institutions and corporations can find a way to integrate different folks that weren't necessarily there at their foundings, but can help them to find their future is something that's really important for us.
Thank you for that. As you all are talking about your experience, you're making me think about my own undergraduate experience at a place 3,000 miles away on the other coast. And one of the things that came to mind as I was navigating, kind of my undergraduate experience and all the challenges around race and trying to be an engineer and whatnot was the importance of, mentors in my life, the importance of individuals who were providing role models, leadership, sometimes knocked me upside my head. What were your experience? Did you all have mentors in your life going through that were impactful? And if so, in what ways? Either of you can start.
Happy to take a jab at that question.
Mm-hmm.
Mentorship was absolutely invaluable during my time at Princeton, both in terms of sponsorship, and by that I mean individuals who were already established, relatively established in their careers. So people like professors, faculty members, and also mentorship from students who might have only been a few years older than I, students that were very much in tune with a lot of the decisions that I was trying to make and a lot of the thoughts that were going through my head. I think that many of my mentors certainly shared the same racial identity as I do, but many others did not. And I think that they were often equally as important to my professional development. I think of one mentor of mine, Professor William Massey, who's actually the first professor at the first African-American professor at Princeton who also obtained his undergraduate degree from Princeton. And he was actually, he was absolutely incredible in shaping who I am today. During my third year at Princeton, he came across a poster presentation I was giving at an academic conference. And that was the first time we had met each other, and he, immediately took a liking for me, and he really encouraged me to really keep pursuing my academic research in the STEM discipline I was pursuing, and supported me in presenting the research I was doing at future academic conferences. And I think that type of support, that type of sponsorship from Professor Massey was absolutely invaluable in helping me, take the first step in pursuing my PhD studies at MIT and really have a mindset in which I plan to continue to pursue this interest in STEM to the highest of my ability.
My story, I'll go to sponsorship first because I think mentorship matters. And, I joined Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated my freshman year, and that provided a lot of mentorship of young Black men that wanted to make sure that I put achievement first and had a lot of fun too. It's all about excellence. But the sponsorship piece for me means that someone might or might not be a mentor, but they give you access to opportunities and they have resources that can get you to the next level. And sponsors, definitely, because we're talking about inequities and disparities. If you're a Black person, or if you're a person of color, if you're a woman, if your sponsors have to look like you to order for you to get success, that's a very narrow road to success. But if we open up who is a sponsor and sees himself as a sponsor and goes out their way to give someone an opportunity, then there'll be a lot more opportunities and more innovation comes when you're more inclusive. So my sponsorship story comes, I took a chance. I studied abroad. I don't know why I wasted a semester away from Princeton, but I went to Baja California Sur, Mexico, and I did marine biology. I came back, I had to write my junior paper. I had to do some metabolic rates for sea lion. So I had to go to this professor, Carlos Martinez del Rio, who's in the ecology and evolutionary biology department. So he helped me do the equations and do the calculations I needed to for my junior paper. But he was like, hey, so you're interested in traveling to Latin America, and hey, you like, of course you're an ecology and evolutionary biology major. I got a trip. We're doing a research project in Chile that's going this summer. I want you to be on that team. So if he didn't just notice me and give me an opportunity to do an all expense paid trip to Chile that summer, that, furthered my international exposure, furthered my opportunity to work in teams. I was the only Black person on that team, but it gave me a chance to expand my world, and the expansion of my worldview set me on a course that helped me to become who I am, which included me going to the Peace Corps later and becoming a science teacher, and then winding my way around to working into nonprofit. So the sponsorship, he didn't have to give me that resource, but it made a huge difference in the way I saw the world and the way I saw myself. And I think that's important for folks to open themselves up.
Thank you all for sharing that. No, and you really all both make very important points. I mean, when we think about mentorship and sponsorship, there's really a number of different things that we all need in order to be able to advance our careers. And I think that it's important for us to be mindful of that. One, as wherever we are in our career, how we develop the network of people around us who continually to support us. And also, how do we pay it forward? we're all at our points in our lives where, we can identify other folks where we want to give them some attention. We want to give them advice. We want to provide sponsorship for, provide access. And so, I think as our audience listens to and thinks about how they can make a difference in this diversifying the STEM universe, sponsorship and mentorship is probably one of the easiest and yet most powerful things that they can do. We've had this great conversation and we will continue it, but I also want to get a little bit of audience interaction. So we do have an audience poll that I'm going to have my tech folks put up now. And then we're going to ask you all the question. Okay, and so this is about work. What is the most important criteria you are looking for in your first or next job? And are you looking for meaningful and challenging work, opportunity for professional growth, company reputation, values and commitment to social responsibility, compensation, and benefits? Please vote. You've got about 20 seconds. So I guess now we can, tech folks can give us what the answers are, and then my colleagues can talk to us about where our perspectives are. Here we go. So can everyone see the results? So it looks like 32% of folks are looking for meaningful and challenging work. 59% are looking for opportunities for professional growth. 21% care about a company's reputation, and 14% care about compensation and benefits. What do y'all think about that? What are your personal perspectives when you think about what you're looking for your work?
I'll launch in, Nicholas, and then I'll let you go. So from some of the story I told before, I didn't lead with a plan. I went from being a biology major to getting degrees in teaching and nonprofit management and getting a Ph.D. in public and urban policy. So a lot of my path had a lot to do with following my passion and trying to be excellent and learning as much as I can wherever I was. And each stop, I learned a little bit more about what was possible. I learned a little bit more about how I needed to show up at work. To be frank, I also learned a lot about the barriers that are in different fields and different spaces and how to navigate them and how to get coached on them. It's important to fail and to get up from failing, because that's how you get to excellence and admitting mistakes and becoming humble. And so for me, jobs that I had an opportunity to really grow and learn and experiment and innovate were what led me to where I am. And I think if you are able to innovate and you're able to learn, if folks give you new projects that may or may not have been what you majored in, or may not have been what you did before, but allow you to grow and to get an expertise and to inform, then I think that's where opportunity comes. And really tying it to inclusion, I think if companies are hiring people of color, Black people are not a monolith. All Latinx community is not all the same. But if you get to see individuals for who they are and like what their insights and passions are, I think that's a way to unleash access to new markets, new innovations, to shore yourself up and not make the same old silly mistakes that you would have made before by including new ideas. And I think growth opportunities and using inclusion as one of the ingredients that's a part of it, I think is something that's really exciting for young people of color who are coming up within the industry.
I would certainly echo that point you shared, Rossan, about wanting to always feel like you're learning as much as possible, regardless of what you're doing. I think that personally, one of the things that I really like to think about when it comes to thinking about internship opportunities or early career positions is optimizing for knowledge accumulation and the development of competencies that will be useful throughout my career. So in keeping with that, I very much do hope to continually be learning in whatever professional pursuit I end up pursuing, in a way that also gives me a lot of agency in the work that I'm doing. I never want to go 4 or 6 months on a job while feeling that I haven't learned something new. I think that that's a belief that I really hold deep in my heart. And coupled with that, in keeping with our earlier comments regarding the significance of mentorship, I do also greatly value access to mentorship opportunities, whether formal or informal, when it comes to a professional opportunity. I think that really speaks to that point about future professional growth.
Thank you all for that. Let's turn just a little bit, because we also want to talk about directly inclusivity in STEM. What are some of the things you think our companies need to be doing? Because like I said at the outset, the country has been aware of the need to make the STEM world more inclusive for 20 plus years, explicitly. And yet we have failed in that miserably. What do you think, from your different vantage points, we need to be doing? Or let's start with, what do you think our companies should be doing? As opposed to, we won't make it an individual action. We'll go big this time. What should our company partners be doing or thinking about to try to close this gap based upon what you've experienced thus far?
So David, I want to jump right in because I've thought a lot about this from my experience at the Emma Bowen Foundation and talking to recruiters, for 5 years straight, or just thinking about even my own career. If you're going to innovate, you have to be innovative in your approach to your search. It is not innovative to say, all right, we need people who are going to code. All right, so who is exactly the coding majors, and then not look at anybody else and just like have innovation defined really narrowly. We're learning intersectionality and recognizing that people can be multiple things at once. You can be a major of a certain thing and then still have hobbies and interests that are in a different place, and the capacity to grow and expand in a completely different way. Just as someone can be, an Afro-Latina that is, LGBTQ. So we need to think of like whole people and getting ways to identify talent and a hunger to learn, more so than just writing people off because like their resume wasn't like a computer science major right away. If you're building an innovation team, like what are really truly the criteria? Another thing that I've seen some other companies do is, if your search terms are really narrow, like even forget about the entry level part, but I want a mid to senior manager that's worked in an innovative company and have gone to, I'm gonna pick on Stanford University, and they need to be Black. If you look at the search terms and the intersections of institutional and unintentional racism that took to get to that person, your search terms get you down to maybe 3 people, and then like the whole industry is fighting for the same 3 people. So that's basic. That's not innovative. That's not going the extra mile. I think if you're thinking about your innovation, you got to be innovative. And so what are things you do? Get to know people, give people projects, see how they fail or do, expand your circle. Now, and lastly, compensation matters. So you need to understand what the competition is. And so make sure that you set your level of what you expect to get for a certain price point. Like make sure that there's not some cognitive dissonance, because if you're paying somebody, let's say $60,000, but they can go across the street and get $100,000 to do similar work, and at a company that's known more for doing that, they're going to definitely take the money and the reputation of their company. So I think folks need to be a little bit more innovative about their approaches, and also think about what it really takes to be innovative in this environment.
Hey, Nicholas, what are your perspective as someone who I'm sure is highly recruited all the time? What are some of the things you think that companies can and should be doing to get more folks?
So I'd like to share an experience from a company I interned with a previous summer. I interned at a global investment and technology company. And I think that organization was an organization whose workforce does not represent the racial demographics of the United States. And I do think that being said, I personally was impressed with many of the efforts that they have adopted to work to correct that challenge. In particular, they operate several fellowship programs designed to focus on college students from groups that have been underrepresented in that industry. And what the fellowship program consists of is a 3-day or a week-long opportunity to bring in students from these groups into the firm so that they can learn about the industry space, often for the first time, have a chance to interact with professionals at the firm and get a better sense of what that type of work consists of. Some of these fellowships are focused on people of color, some are focused on members of the LGBT community. I believe one fellowship is focused on or is in partnership with a specific HBCU. And I do think that that initiative has been fruitful in recruiting additional people of color to the firm. Of course, more work still needs to be done. And I think that one thing that is really key that Rossan touched on is this idea of not focusing on a very niche profile of candidate that these firms are trying to recruit. I think that these fellowship programs are very effective in that they cast a relatively broad net and really work to try and capture some of this intersectionality that Rossan was pointing to.
And I just want to say one more thing to that. I think companies, well, the companies I interacted with at the Emma Bowen Foundation, they're employing people of color. And people think about the way social capital works is you can only, spend the social capital that you have. And so if you don't know, if your network is a little bit narrow, then you're not going to be able to recruit different types of folks. So as you're doing search, lean on the employee resource groups, get folks to be more inclusive of like who are in their networks to attract talent and to have conversations. That creates a culture. And I definitely know, the elephant in the room, in talking about race, not everyone's an expert. And I don't think there's one way to talk about race, but there is an intention. And if you approach it with grace and give yourself the chance to make mistakes, and also include people that are closest to you that can help you, in particular, folks that are already working at your company, then companies can get uncommon results.
Great, thank you for that. I think you all are helping the companies with a lot of your perspectives and helping them to up their game. I'm going to ask the audience if you have any questions to please put them into the Q&A area. And then I actually was going to pull one out of the Q&A space now just because it just seemed to be low-hanging fruit for Nicholas. What's your perspective on bias in machine learning? And what studies can you share with those of us who want to find out more? Because as you can imagine, machine learning is touching everything that we could do. And since you're the expert right now, what are the things that we should be looking at from that space? Because bias is affecting everything that we do these days.
Right. I think that is definitely a really important topic, critically important topic, especially given the increasing role that machine learning systems and algorithmic decision-making systems are playing in our world. And the fundamental challenge lies in the fact that the common meaning of bias is actually very different from the mathematical meaning of bias when it comes to designing these systems. Mathematically, a system is said to be unbiased if it represents whatever underlying characteristics exist in the data set that is used to train these models. The downside there is that results in these systems then just learning to perpetuate whatever systemic biases exist in the data sets that researchers might curate or that companies might curate. So I think that a lot of work needs to be done in thinking of ways to better collect data sets that are representative of the population that whatever machine learning system is being built is designed to serve. And coupled with that, also advances from the algorithmic or the theoretical standpoint to try to design ways to correct for biases in the event that it is not possible to collect a data set that is representative of the underlying population. So I think those are some of the important concepts to keep in mind there.
I want to chime in really quickly because this goes to a conversation I literally had yesterday. So Pymetrics is a company that's trying to create artificial intelligence that helps hiring processes that works out bias. And they came and approached me because my organization helps all of New York City figure out how we can improve ourselves and have, equity in hiring. Everyone has economic opportunity. Folks can invest in New York City and everyone can thrive. And they are on the social part of this, are working to get a bill before an all.
I think Rossan may have frozen for a second. Okay, well, while he's doing that, we have another question for you, Nicholas. You're really popular today. There's a 50-year-old sophomore at George Washington University. Wow, young folks these days, y'all are amazing. Anyway, he's going into the STEM field where there are so few African Americans, and he asks, what is the best way to find a mentor with a similar background?
Well, first of all, congratulations to you, Curtis. That's absolutely incredible. And I am sympathetic to the fact that, especially at that young age, it can feel very difficult to be able to identify mentors with a similar background. I think that some of my advice to you would be that, emailing does work, sending LinkedIn messages does work. I would definitely encourage you to reach out to people whose emails you might have access to, whose LinkedIn profiles you might think might align with the type of mentor you're looking for. And I do think that, although it might be discouraging to get a few no's or to get a few individuals who don't respond to you, I think that eventually people will answer you. And I do think that it will be fruitful.
Yeah, I think that's great. And Curtis, I would add to that a couple of things. One, if you're looking for mentors on campus and whatnot, as quiet as it's kept, most professors really don't get a lot of attention from students who actually want to talk to them about what it is that they're actually doing. People want to come talk to us as professors about problem sets and stuff like that. But if you come in, you say, hey, I really am interested in what you're studying, all of a sudden the professor's ears pick up and they become very interested in wanting to invest in you. And that applies whether you're a Black professor, white professor, male or female or whatnot. And that leads me to my second point, which is, mentors can come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. And so I was happy at my time at Stanford to have lots of Stanford folks within the Black community who looked out for me and made it through so I could graduate. But I can also look back and I can say Jim March, who was one of the top guys in organizations, was my mentor in graduate school. And he was a white guy. But he was great, always completely supportive. And so, allow for the opportunity to find mentors in a lot of different places. I think the answer is both. You want a kind of cadre of folks, or as I would frame it, your personal board of directors, all of these folks aligned to give you advice and support to help you along your way. Let me see, what question do we have here next? Employment-wise. Employment-wise, how have you all navigated the implicit bias that is oftentimes common within the tech space? Essentially, how do you navigate being the only Black employee in a space of Asian and white peers, especially when culturally you may be quite different?
So David, if I can take this all the way back, one of the issues that we all suffer from, it's in the air, is some of the founding myths of our country and some of the lies we had to tell ourselves to create the democracy that we have. And I hate to take it all the way back, but no, the origin has impact on the current. So if you had folks that were 3/5 of a man, if you had folks that, that lived indigenously on a land and you're like, well, that wasn't your land, you didn't own it, we own it. People have a lot of assumptions that make them tell themselves that they're not doing wrong. And sometimes they tell themselves a little bit negative stories. Well, those people didn't know what they were doing. Oh, these people are a little bit dumber. These are people that, aren't deserving. And some of those stereotypes and the shadows of those stereotypes follow us forward. And so some people see darker skin and, it doesn't matter if you're a person of color or you're white, the narrative, the culture has kind of taught us to be fearful of people of color. So Nicholas is from Canada and Canadian, has a little bit different experience, but my experience, being born American, having people that were up from enslaved folks that came through Charleston, South Carolina, all of those narratives, are kind of placed on you, and how you react to them is partially personal. But the reality is that stereotyping, what people do in a blink, those reactions and stereotypes happen. And I think what we need to do first and foremost is recognize how some of the negative assumptions that people have affect us. Because if you don't really just acknowledge it, then it can kind of corrosively eat you away. And then, once you know how it affects you, find people you can talk to. They might be allies that are white. They might be people of color to help you navigate them. I do think that, especially in this moment, of social justice and in the wake of George Floyd's murder, that conversations where you find allies and co-conspirators and having these conversations is really healthy, because I think all of us want to get to a better place. And the conversation isn't the same for everyone, but it's really important for us to find ways to talk about it, to navigate it. It's not people of color's job to explain to other folks that, hey, I'm cute and cuddly and I'm smart and I know these things. I mean, you don't put the person that is kind of being objectified to educate everybody else, but hopefully we can create environments where learning and better culture can be created, so that we can take, like, our origin story is not our defining story. The defining story is like all the ideals that we were working towards when we were trying to build this nation in the first place.
Well, I'm being told we're going to wrap up. So here's how we're going to wrap up. I have one question left that, because it's from Nikki Bethel, I have to take it. And this is going to be aimed at you. Then I'm going to give you all each a minute to kind of wrap up. So Nicholas, Nikki is asking, what advice do you have for those who are running development programs for young scholars? What specifically can they do to attract male scholars of color into their program? She's the new person running the Emma Bowen Foundation, but if you can think about it from our company's perspectives, a lot of these companies are running these same types of programs, trying to get young Black men in particular into their programs. So what kind of personal advice could you give based upon your experience that can make these kind of more enticing, more alluring, more impactful?
Right, it's definitely a very important question. I'm happy to take a stab at it and to share some of my thoughts. I suppose I can only speak to what I personally would find most attractive to such a program, but I would really fall back on some of the points I introduced earlier, where I think that one of the things that I would find most attractive is opportunities for mentorship, whether formal or informal, in such a program. And mentorship that I think would help contribute to my future professional growth, ideally by an individual who shares a similar identity as I do, but of course, touching on some of the ideas that we mentioned earlier, not limiting myself or the program in scope to only looking at mentors with that shared identity. I think that is something that I would find particularly helpful. I think that another thing that I personally would find helpful is if a colleague of mine or if a peer of mine who had previously participated in the program were to then become an advocate for that program, and then in some sense be a spokesperson or be open to sharing their own experiences having gone through the program. I think that that is something that I have responded to extremely positively in the past. And I think that hearing that type of reflection shared by a peer of mine is something that I would greatly value.
Cool, thank you for sharing that. Now I'm gonna give you all each like a minute to wrap up with, what are your final thoughts? What are the things that you want to people to take away from you after listening to our conversation today? Rahsaan, you can go.
Okay, Rossan, go ahead.
All right, I'll go. So this is not rocket science, but it's also not easy, because it takes courage, because there are systems that were created that benefit certain individuals and certain kind of metrics, because the way the game was designed, it wasn't designed with different kind of indicators of success. So, from like a systems perspective, like, we need to create different types of systems. We need to identify different types of success so that you can get the results that you want. And there's going to be discomfort, there's going to be tension, there's going to be opportunities for folks to come from different perspectives. But the most rigorous processes get the best and well thought out results. And so think of inclusion in that kind of way. If you're not doing a great job of recruiting coders of color or folks on your sales team of color or whatever it is, it's not because the talent isn't out there, it's because there's a gap, and you need to find a way to solve that gap to get the talent that's out there to the things that you want to solve. And so don't have to be an expert, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. Get in there, make a good try, and beautiful things will happen. Because Bill Massey took a chance to mentor Nicholas. I knew about Professor Massey back in the day, and you let Bill Massey in, and then you get, a Nicholas Johnson. And
Nicholas?
I think that being an ally is not a part-time job. True allies always stand up, regardless of the circumstances. So this means that when you hear a comment being made in passing that is racist or works against creating an inclusive environment in an institution, it's your responsibility to speak up and call out or call in that behavior, irrespective of who else is present. And I think that would be one of the most important calls to action I could share with you all. And to students and early career people listening in, my advice to you is to seek opportunities for continued learning, but also to not feel like you don't already possess sufficient skills to make active, meaningful contributions in whatever organization or institution you're a part of.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for the conversation today. This was fantastic. Michelle, I'm turning it back over to you. Thank you for letting me be a part of it today. Michelle Ray, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, David, Nicholas, and Rossan. Really grateful for you to take the time to share your stories and to provide keen insights into your thinking. A couple of things that sort of bubbled up for me today was words like sponsorship, mentorship, allyship, opportunities, internships, bias. Please reach out to the Cates Foundation if you want to follow up with any of our speakers today, and or you need some additional information about internship programs at both the Emma Bowen Foundation as well as the T. Howard Foundation, which we work very collaboratively with. So please feel free to reach out to us. And again, sincere appreciation and gratitude to our panelists today. Future episodes of Courageous Conversation will cover topics such as strong women lead, how diversity drives innovation, and we are looking forward to giving you those dates once we confirm our lineup. What else should I tell you? I think we need to segue into our backstage. Yeah, if you have a backstage pass or if you signed up to go backstage, could you just stay on hold for a moment and our team will allow you to get in to our meet and greet, both with the speakers who are on this call today, as well as some other guests from some of the companies who have been sponsors for us. So please just stay tuned. And again, if you take nothing away from today's conversation, please remember that words may inspire, but action really creates change. So have a great afternoon and please remember to vote. Thank you so much.